afternoon, honourable members. Good afternoon, officials and support staff. Thank you very much for joining us on this afternoon. Today is Thursday, the 23rd of June, 2022. It has just gone 1 o'clock and you have now joined the meeting of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament's Standing Committee on Agriculture, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning. My name is Enrique van der Westhuizen. It's my privilege to chair this committee for the Western Cape, and I would like our honourable members to also introduce themselves and for us to establish whether we are quorate. Can I ask the honourable members to please just present themselves?
Good afternoon, Chairperson. I'm Kilian Bosman.
Good afternoon, Chairperson. I'm Derek America, member of the committee. Thank you.
Good
afternoon, Chairman and members. I'm Peter Murray, not officially a member of this committee, but a very interesting party to the deliberations.
Thank you, honourable members. You're most welcome. I did see the name of Honourable Maran on the list of attendees as well.
Thanks, Chairperson. I've just joined. Good afternoon to yourself and others present. My name is Pat Maran, member of this committee.
Good, thank you, and a warm welcome. With that, we've established that we are indeed quorate. And that we can continue with this meeting. Honourable members, I've received one apology, and that was from MEC Bradell, who submitted an apology in writing to our procedural officer. And with that, I would like to also hand over to Ms. Shippey to introduce, Ms. Shippey, if you could introduce the members from the department, and then I'll give over to Dr. Umar to introduce her staff that have also joined us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson, and thank you for making time on this particular item on your agenda. I do see that our head of department has just come in. He seems to have had a few connection problems. Perhaps I can hand over to him to just introduce the team.
Thank you, Ms. Shippey. Over to you, Mr. Gerber, if possible.
Sorry, I couldn't hear there for a second, but I can hear you now. Apologies. Good afternoon, Chairperson, honourable members. Yes, we're going to give a presentation. Cape Nature will give the presentation. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you on this important matter.
Good, thank you, Mr. Gerber. And, since you've just joined, you probably haven't had an opportunity to see which of your staff have joined us here this afternoon. Would it be fine with you if Ms. Shippey then introduce herself and perhaps also indicate whether there are other members from the department that have joined us?
Yes, please. Let's do that. Thank you, Chairperson. Karen, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. So it is myself on behalf of the department. I'm also the chairperson of the task team for the Drift Sands response. And my director, Marlene LaRosse, is also online from Biodiversity and Coastal Management. Thank you.
Good, thank you very much. And Dr. Umar, can you perhaps also introduce your officials and yourself?
Good afternoon, Chairperson and honourable members from Cape Nature side. I have with me Carol Burrs, who's our Director for Biodiversity Capabilities, who will be making the presentation to the committee. Then I also have the head of our legal department, Barry Barnes, who will answer all the legal questions together with Karen Shippey and also Carol Burrs. And I have Natalie Haywood, who is the landscape manager responsible for the particular reserve under consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Good, thank you very much. As I've said, a warm welcome to you all. on a cold and thankfully wet Boland afternoon in the middle of winter. We are also fortunate to be joined by a number of other people from the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. I first would like to recognize Ms. Niekerk, who has organized this and joined us while actually in Gauteng, busy with a program or a course on which he's been sent by the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. And I think I speak on behalf of us all if I say thank you very much for joining us, while actually trying to keep two balls simultaneously in the air. Then we also have with us our parliamentary legal advisor, Advocate Romeo Marsdorp. Advocate Marsdorp, thank you very much also for joining us. I will be calling on you later to just also set out, whether you're satisfied that the legal prescripts have been followed. And then I also recognize from the department Ms. Nomfundo Mshumpela, who is our committee assistant. And if I scroll up, I see also our senior procedural officer, Mr. Johan Vermeulen. And I do know that Mr. Johan Kutsie is also on standby should the signal between Gauteng and the Western Cape suffer due to load shedding. A number of members have also indicated that they currently are experiencing load shedding, and I'm grateful that Honourable Maran was able to overcome those limitations. I've also received an apology from the Honourable Sean August, who indicated that he might also have connection problems, and it seems to me as if that apology must be noted. Are there any people that have joined us that we have not yet recognized and who believe that, I should be calling out their names? Please put up your hands should that be the case. Good. Honourable members, just a little bit of background then to this afternoon's meeting. As you know, the item on the agenda is that the briefing by the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning and Cape Nature on the possible withdrawal of the declaration of the Drift Sands Nature Reserve in terms of Section 24(1)(b) of the National Environmental Management Protected Areas Act of 2003. And the Minister has written to the Speaker to request that the House consider the request to withdraw the proclamation of the Drift Sands Nature Reserve. Now, members have been served with a copy of the referral dated the 14th of June, that was last week, as well as the motivational letter from the Minister of Local Government, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning dated the 26th of November 2021. Members have also received a copy of the National Environmental Management Act for protected areas. And then with that as a background, I would like to then hand over perhaps to Dr. Umar, who will then, it seems to me, hand over to Ms. Carol Burs for the presentation. Dr. Umar, would you like to just say a word or two regarding the request for the proclamation?
Well, thank you, Honourable Chair. Carol will outline to us the whole dual legal processes that has transpired, and also give us some context of the impact of the unlawful settlements within the reserve, mining, etc., that have and still is impacting on the biodiversity value. And that is then the fundamental reasons for us putting forward the reason or underpinning the reasons for the withdrawal the conservation status of the nature reserve currently. So I'm not going to say much more except to ask Coral to present, and then we can avail ourselves for any questions that emanate from the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Umar. Ms. Birch, would you like to beam? Yes, your presentation has just appeared on our screens. Perhaps if you wouldn't mind putting it into presentation mode, then it might be clearer. Excellent, we've got it. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Honourable Chair, and good afternoon, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members. So I'm here to provide a presentation on the recommendation for the withdrawal of the declaration of Drift Sands Nature Reserve on behalf of Cape Nature and in consultation with the department. And I'm briefly going to start by just going over the legal process. So Dr. Omar has indicated that there's a dual process, and the reason for tabling it with the Standing Committee is in terms of the Protected Areas Act requirement, which is referred to in section 24(1)(b), where the withdrawal of a nature reserve requires a resolution by the provincial legislature in terms of support. The chairman did note that we did send a letter to the speaker and a subsequent follow-up, and that the cabinet resolution notes the intention to initiate the legal process to withdraw the declaration of Drift Sands. And then the dual process relating to the deeming clause of the Protected Areas Act. So the deeming clauses being section 12 and section 23 in the Protected Areas Act, which speaks to how Drift Sands becomes a protected area with regards to the Protected Areas Act of 2003, and a simultaneous process as, oops, not moving slide. Okay, there we go. That the abolishment of the nature reserve as it was established in terms of the ordinance is also required. So the processes are running simultaneously, in the sense that we have initiated the process and have published a notice around the intended abolishment, and invited comments to that process, and that comments closed on the 17th of June. So the report in terms of the comments is still being drawn up and finalized, but the initial indications are that there were 20 comments received, of which 19 are objections based primarily on the loss of biodiversity or the conservation value, and the precedent that will be set through the illegal occupation of the nature reserve. The submission, however, is pending the outcome of this parliamentary process for the final deproclamation of Drift Sands Nature Reserve. Just in terms of the context of Drift Sands Nature Reserve, it was established in 1983 in accordance with the provisions of the ordinance, and then, as I have just indicated, deemed as a protected area in terms of the Protected Areas Act, as it met the requirements. But as an extract in terms of the purpose for declaration that speaks to the Protected Areas Act, it speaks to the values or the purpose, and there are a number. And in the Protected Areas Management Plan for Drift Sands Nature Reserve, the primary values for its declaration is to protect ecologically viable areas representative of South Africa's biological diversity, to preserve the ecological integrity of those areas, to conserve biodiversity in those areas, to protect representative areas of naturally occurring ecosystems, habitats and species, to protect South Africa's threatened or rare species, and to protect vulnerable or ecologically sensitive areas. And these are supported by, I want to say, secondary values. They're not really secondary, but it is around using what is in the primary values to achieve certain outputs, so which relate to assist in ensuring the sustained supply of environmental goods and services, including and acknowledging that there may be servitudes, to support the management of the interrelationship between natural environmental biodiversity, human settlement and economic development, to contribute to human, social, cultural, spiritual and economic development, or to rehabilitate and restore degraded ecosystems to promote the recovery of threatened species. So those being the principal informants in terms of let's say, the purpose for which Drift Sands is considered a nature reserve and subsequently a protected area. Just an overview of exactly where it is. So on screen, the red lines indicate over here the R300 and the N2, so the national road on this way. So it lies on the corner and is demarcated by the green boundary. And just a brief overview in terms of events. So the original extent of Drift Sands when it was proclaimed or established was 736,86 hectares. And in 2016, certain sections were submitted for deproclamation to facilitate the establishment of formal settlements, being Green Park, Los Angeles, and Sikumbule. So then, and at the end of 2006, the remaining extent of Drift Sands was 507 hectares. And then starting in April 2020, specifically July to September, saw a rapid unlawful settlement on Drift Sands. And at January 2021, the remaining extent, 372 hectares. And by September 2021, the remaining extent in terms of that had not been settled or transformed, it was estimated at 305 hectares, which primarily constitutes the dam area, so this area over here, and some of the remnants of vegetation. We just delve a little bit deeper in terms of the impacts of the unlawful settlement. I think if I demonstrate it in this way, in April 2020, basically the settlements went into these areas over here and all of this remained intact. And subsequently by July, there were areas over here that had been occupied in addition to the pre-existing areas. July to August, an additional up to 1,500 structures within the boundary of the nature reserve. By August, roughly 8,000 structures, and a change in terms of actually indicating where all the structures are, or where areas have been excavated in orange and in red across the area, underlying this with the wetland or the water bodies as they have been demarcated within the boundary of the reserve. Then by September 2021, looking at the roughly 11,000 structures, and we are waiting updated drone footage to indicate the extent of settlement as is at the moment. So that is just to indicate over time what that has looked like. So at the moment, by January, it was 11,500 structures, and that is an update on that. As indicated in one of the previous slides, we indicated that there are various areas of excavations, and these also entailed illegal sand mining, and this visual basically demonstrates the extent of sand mining and the impacts on Drift Sands Nature Reserve. The impacts on the primary values, as indicated, basically speak to the extent and the density of the infestations, I apologize. Those are alien plant infestations, which are not appropriate. The occupation, and then on the aerial photograph to be able to see, the level of occupation across Drift Sands Nature Reserve, and noting that the primary values were defined as being representative for Cape Flats Dune Sunveld, where Drift Sands contributes 25% of the national target, and was the largest intact remnant incorporating critically endangered false bay subtype and endangered Cape lowland wetland ecosystems. 4 threatened species, primarily their habitats are distributed across Drift Sands, I should say were, of which 2 notably are endangered species. Then in terms of looking at the secondary values relating to the coverage of water courses, So 37% of the area is covered by watercourses, representing the critically endangered wetlands associated with the Kuils River floodplain, and more importantly also an area to recharge the Cape Flats aquifer, and contributing 4.3% of wetlands within this bioregion. If I move over to some of the key considerations, so we acknowledge that the scale and nature of the rapid unlawful settlement means that the site can no longer serve its intended purpose in terms of being a nature reserve as the result of the irreplaceable and irrevocable loss of biodiversity and ecosystem integrity. It also impacts on our effectiveness to provide access opportunities for jobs, recreation, religious, cultural, and citizen science, as these can no longer be realized. The withdrawal of the declaration status and the relinquishing of the nature reserve, although considered highly undesirable as a precedent for the conservation sector, has up until now obviously caused some reputational damage for Cape Nature and for the Western Cape government. However, the circumstances which prevailed in 2020 and the resulting rapid unlawful settlement on Drift Sands Nature Reserve are considered a force majeure for which Cape Nature feels we cannot be specifically held accountable. We have considered other alternatives and have concluded that they're not really feasible, because these being either to regain control through evictions or relocation of the occupants, or to look at whether biodiversity as it was can be restored, and noting that very specific biodiversity features have been irrevocably lost, we do not see restoration as a viable option. We also acknowledge that currently there are significant risks to officials, users, assets, and infrastructure that will prevail if the site cannot be relinquished, and that the lack of provision of water, sanitation, waste, and electricity services, also the risk of illness, injury, or death to those occupying the site, have human rights implications, and that deproclamation will mitigate against additional human rights risks for the most vulnerable citizens and enable delivery of essential services and enable the movement of occupiers out of harm's way. Some of the contingent actions to address the unlawful settlement can actually only be effected after the site has been deproclaimed, and these include the consideration of mixed land use with the integrated housing solution, and the consideration of future use and protection for the critical flood retention infrastructure, which is the municipal retention dam on the site. Speaking to the municipal retention dam and the site, so these red areas here primarily is the dam wall, and this is looking at March last year in terms of the structures that were on the dam wall and below the dam wall that were in immediate danger and needed mechanisms to relocate or reallocate these structures to other areas. Then just in closing, our recommendation is that the committee consider to support the withdrawal of the declaration of Drift Sands Nature Reserve in terms of Section 24(1)(b) of the Protected Areas Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Birch. Can I just see by raising of hands if there are any questions to Ms. Birch and her colleagues? Thank you. I recognize Honourable Marais and then Honourable Maran.
Chairperson, I must admit I'm quite shocked by the admission of the Western Cape government that this Western Cape is now run by land invaders. They've given up, hands up, hands up. We're no more in charge. Land invaders are in charge. They can destroy biodiversity. Even if the land isn't suitable for housing, it's theirs. Even if there's no water, no electricity, no sanitation services, and we don't have money, they can stay there. Even if they think it's unfit, they still have acquired a right. How does this, now I want the department to tell me, how does them staying there on that unsuitable land qualify in terms of the Constitution as adequate housing? The Constitution says all citizens has the right to access to adequate housing. You've just painted a picture, it's inadequate. Where it was built, there's no services, no water, no electricity, no sanitation services. The biodiversity is being spoiled and it's covered by water, 37% of the land. Explain to me, have you stopped governing there? Why didn't you timeously prevent it by all means to keep people off the land?
Thank you, Honourable Murray. The next in line is Honourable Moran, then America, and then I'll, if there are no further questions from members, I would like to pose a question or two. And then I saw Mr. Gerber's hand being raised momentarily. Honourable Moran.
Thanks, Chairperson. First of all, let me welcome the presentation by the department. Look, Chair, and that's my understanding. I've looked through the presentation earlier on, also now, when it was presented by Mississippi. Is the one and only issue here in front of us is the deproclamation of basically Drafsands as a nature reserve. All other issues is secondary, according to my understanding, because if the deproclamation is successful, key consideration, basically the issue of land, mixed land use, integrating housing, will be an issue for another department, which is not this particular department that brought that issue in front of us. So the only issue here, Chair, to my understanding, is whether we support the deproclamation of Drafsands to be regarded as not to be regarded as a nature reserve anymore. Chair, and the Honourable the Honourable Murray raised the important issue, the issue of land invasions. And I've read something on Facebook during the course of this week where it seems that this new squatter camp that's been erected there, it got a name. And the name of that squatter camp is the name of a City of Cape Town councillor, a councillor that belongs to the EFF. And I'm not so sure whether this indicates that these people are responsible for the land invasions. And I think that's an issue, and I'm not sure whether there was investigation to get to the bottom of it. If not, I would like to understand why not. Because we cannot have a situation and where this deproclamation basically will set a precedent where more and more nature reserves will be basically invaded. We cannot allow such a situation, Chair. So I want to understand whether there was investigation, who is behind the land invasions. If not, why not? And if, what is the detail, basically, of that investigation? Also, Chair, there's 3,000. What is the exact amount? I think it's around about 3,400 sects or structures that's in immediate danger. After the deproclamation, whose baby will that be? Will it be the baby of another department? Will the land be handed over to the City of Cape Town and they must deal with those people? Whose responsibility will it be to make sure that those sects or structures gets relocated? Lastly, Chair, in this presentation speaks about eviction. If the department is successful to get this nature reserve deproclaimed, will they still pursue the issue of eviction? And if, why? Thanks.
Thank you, Honourable Moran, and then over to Honourable America.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, part of the key considerations of the department in support of the deproclamation is that, and I quote bullet point 4, the circumstances which prevailed in 2020 and the resulting rapid unlawful settlement on Drift Sand Nature Reserve are considered a force majeure for which Cape Nature cannot be held specifically accountable. So my question is that in terms of accountability, what is sort of implied with that? Is it natural catastrophe that may occur as a result of the inclement weather that we experience, that those over 3,000 shack dwellers are in immediate danger that Honourable Moran is talking about, that there will be no sort of liability towards, damages that may occur as a result of that. And if we do declare support the recommendation, what now? What will then happen year after if the nature reserve is proclaimed as a nature reserve? Because there are real people out there that live in structures that may not be classified as habitable or whatever. Whose responsibility is it going to become? Because the major implication of that is that the next thing that may occur is that those people are going to protest on the N2 and block off the N2 and demand services from the city of Cape Town, and also cause major disruption in our city. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, honourable members. Are there any other hands? In the absence of any other hands, let me just pose my two questions. My first question relates to the presentation and the photograph to illustrate the illegal mining of sand in the reserve. This seems to be not of an informal nature, but the photograph with a digger loader and a tippet truck seems as if this happened on a large scale. Was that indeed the case? Because my understanding is that mining in a nature reserve is strictly forbidden, and that those assets should have been forfeited, and the police should have acted. So my first question deals with what have you done to try and protect, to lay complaints with the police, and were you really proactive in trying to protect the area? My second one is I was unaware of the public participation process that seems to have just closed, and as you indicated, that report must still be finalized. And my question is, would it be wise of this committee to proceed with the recommendation to the House in the light of the current public participation process and without us having insight in the objections to the deproclamation? And then thirdly, I would like to latch on to what the Honourable America has asked. Are you prepared, or have you prepared a plan of action, and whereby the responsibility for this piece of land would be transferred to another department within the Western Cape, and that department would be able to prepare for the responsibilities that goes along with the responsibility to manage an asset such as this. And if I may add a third question, it seems to me we've got two main options. The one is to recommend the deproclamation. The other one is not to recommend the deproclamation. But my question is also, would there be an option to protect part of this nature reserve? It seems to me as if the boundaries of the nature reserve in the past have been changed. And would that be an option in order to protect the most critically endangered species, or at least an area in which these species do occur? With that, can I hand back to you, Ms. Burst, to respond to these questions?
Thank you, Honourable Chair. I am going to refer to Ms. Shippey and Dr. Omar to start in terms of addressing the overview questions, and will avail myself for the technical bits. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I noted that our head of department had put up his hand earlier. Perhaps he wants to go first, and then I can pick up the other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gerber.
My chairperson, thank you. Yes, we will ask officials to come in on specific questions, and thank you, important questions. In terms of Honourable Member Marais, a question, Honourable Member Maran have answered that question before. The standing committee and the letter to the speaker is the deproclamation, and the deproclamation only. There is a lot of processes to still follow, and many decisions still to be made, and some of it not by Cape Nature but by other parties, City of Cape Town, Department of Transport and Public Works, Department of Human Settlements and others, and difficult decisions to follow. In terms of all the measures taken, and Cape Nature will also come in on this. During the lockdown, in terms of the regulations and the directions, everybody were prevented from taking common law steps of counter spoliation in terms of unlawful occupation of land, and all the court cases and things that have been running at that time and since then. And therefore, it's the same as Knoflokskraal national government land that was invaded for the same reason, because of the national lockdown restrictions and those directions. Certain measures couldn't be taken by government on government land, and also not by private landowners on private land. So within the City of Cape Town and within the other municipalities, on provincial land, on a national land, exactly the same thing was happening. We were limited in what we could do. And of course, now following the lifting of those lockdown regulations, those restrictions, those directions, it's now about simply running to the court for eviction orders. It is about how do we responsibly address the situation that we're now confronted with. And therefore, there's a lot of dialogue underway in terms of that, and obviously the merits of each case to be specifically considered. In terms of the causes, Honourable Member Maran, that's a critical question, that although it's unlawful action, it's criminal activity, the root causes are critical to address. Because otherwise, we can get eviction orders, as we often do, but what's causing that to happen? And if there's criminality and people selling land and people that already have benefited from the housing codes, those things are specifically to be addressed. But there are many legitimate issues there that needs to be addressed by all of government, with civil society and others. So this is exactly the discussions that are underway by all of government at the moment, in light of where we are now, looking at how do we move forward. We certainly can't sort these matters out through the courts, although often our hand is forced in trying to at least try and move forward on some of these cases. Just and please, if the Cape Nature and other colleagues want to respond, please do that. Just in terms of, I'm just going to give initial responses to the remainder of the questions and then ask the colleagues to come in. In terms of the management of the land after the proclamation, absolutely. There's already the plans that are currently in place. It's shared responsibility. The City of Cape Town remains the land use authority in terms of the zoning of properties and the use of properties and what is permissible in terms of the zoning of property, and therefore the city of Cape Town in terms of drift sands, but every other municipality always have the land use authority responsibility. But often the municipalities are also the owner of property, or there's by agreement they become the owner or in control of the land. But they're also the level 2 assigned authority in terms of human settlement delivery within the metro boundaries. And therefore, they also have those assigned responsibility in terms of the level 2 assignment to the city. And therefore, plans are in place at the moment across with all the partners, Transport and Public Works, Human Settlements, the city, and everybody in terms of the immediate need, which was to get people out of harm's way, that those that are in the areas that are at risk of flooding. While there are other plans underway in terms of how do we move forward in terms of whatever the long-term plans might be. But the deproclamation is now a critical question to say, while it's a nature reserve, certain options can't even be considered. That doesn't mean that everything will be given up for housing. Those decisions are still to be made. A critical consideration is that the dam and the associated infrastructure are City of Cape Town infrastructure. And therefore, if that area needs to be protected for that purpose, it's designed to flood as a stormwater and flood management infrastructure. That will need to be protected by the city in terms of protecting their infrastructure. And therefore, in terms of the chairperson, your question, in terms of whether there's an option of also looking at part of the property still being ultimately protected, yes, if the city maintained the infrastructure there, that would be protected, but not in the form of a provincial nature reserve if deproclaimed. But I'll pause there and then ask the colleagues to please come in, starting with Dr. Omar to maybe guide who she wants to. Sorry, Karen, over to you first as the current chairperson of the task team on which city and everybody are members. But then, Karen, then over to Cape Nature. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yes, the questions that have been raised, thank you very much, honourable members. These are critical discussion points that need to be held. And I think probably to pull together the question of what actually happened during 2020, this question of a force majeure is quite an important legal discussion that's been had in terms of the role Cape Nature has currently and had throughout the COVID disaster in terms of managing land. COVID was, as we all agree, unexpected and impacted normal operations, normal controls, normal law enforcement hugely. And in fact, as we understand it from the risk assessment that's been done, the impetus for people actually moving into the space at all was because they were actually illegally evicted from their backyards, dwellings in Mfuleni. So certainly the initial thrust that came into this space was around that. And there was a lot of work done by Cape Nature at the time to make sure that people recognized the boundaries of the reserve, actually laid charges, etc., and went to court on that matter. What really failed us and failed the whole of the area was the interpretation that was being made about alternative accommodation. So the idea that Cape Nature would have to house people on other pieces of land. We certainly don't have that mandate, nor do we have that budget. So that immediately became an impediment. But then when Cape Nature was calling for assistance, especially when there were big pulses of movement, the law enforcement teams were so stretched at the time that there was actually very little government support for Cape Nature, who were trying to deal with this on their land. So yes, it was well beyond normal operational controls. Cape Nature has now put in place quite different standard operating procedures for other sites to make sure that much quicker, more definitive action can be taken much faster. But I think we need to recognize the state that our society was in during those early days of lockdown. Both lockdown level 5, 4, and even 3, we saw a massive increase in poverty and in lack of food security, etc. And that was driving this enormous push that happened, and as my HOD has said, across the city of Cape Town. So in terms of being able to move forward, the people who are currently in danger have always been the focus of the task team. We've always considered those who are along the river and in the dam basin to be in extreme danger, because if a large enough storm comes, we will see significant flooding. That particular area, as my HOD says, is designed to flood, and the water levels can change very, very rapidly. So we know that it would be incredibly difficult to evacuate people if we were busy having a very large storm. And if the water changes happened during the darkness hours, it is quite possible that people would be trapped in their shacks, and as those shacks are potentially washed away. So the storm that we saw 2 weeks ago was nowhere near as bad as the worst case scenario. It could be a lot worse, and therefore we've been engaging continuously with both the City of Cape Town as well as human settlements to move those people out of harm's way to a higher location so that their lives are not immediately in danger. So those discussions have continued under an emergency disaster management context, but obviously it changes. Should the land use ultimately change, it then becomes a discussion about mixed use development and what would be considered appropriate in future. So this is definitely not considered to be appropriate housing. This is not a housing area. That river area itself is going to continue to be a high hazard area, no matter who owns the land and no matter what land use is being carried out. So there was a question, I think it was Honourable Moran, about specifically those in danger. At the moment, there is money both from Cape Nature as well as from Transport and Public Works that is being used to plan a relocation of those in the worst danger, so those within 10 meters of the river itself. And that program will happen, again, irrespective of whether or not the deproclamation continues. But obviously, formalizing those structures later on is not something that can be considered until this land use issue is resolved. Specifically in terms of evictions, would evictions continue even if Cape Nature has withdrawn from the site after deproclamation? Essentially, whoever holds the land, remembering that if Cape Nature is no longer the user department, they would hand the land back to the custodian, who is Transport and Public Works. And the fundamental principle, whether it be Transport and Public Works, human settlements, or the City of Cape Town, is that no services may be set up in a river. And in immediate flood zone areas, which of course is where people have located themselves. So it cannot be formalized there. Evictions will have to take place so that the river can actually do what it's supposed to do and flood when it needs to, without us having citizens who may actually die because of that natural functioning. Just in terms of responsibility, the landowner has responsibility irrespective of what failure, that force majeure during COVID, irrespective of what actions or lack of actions allowed for these people to remain in this space, the liability remains with the landowner. So people being harmed on site remains Western Cape government's problem. And remember, Cape Nature manages land on the Western Cape government's behalf, but that land is provincial land. So whether Cape Nature is the managing agent or not, Western Cape government has ownership and needs to take responsibility and has legal liability for that. The question about protests and disruption, unfortunately, people are already protesting. They've already demanded services. They've already approached the City of Cape Town separately. And the answer has been the same from all agencies. No one can put services into a river area. People need to be in much safer areas, much higher ground before anything like that can be considered. But there are plans, we understand, to approach national in order to get funding for services, because there is a constitutional obligation on the City of Cape Town, as my HOD mentioned. But again, this is not something that Cape Nature has a mandate for or actually has any skills or resources for. In terms of the sand mining specifically, I am going to ask Natalie Haywood to come in. She's been directly involved in the enforcement operations that have occurred there, as well as in laying charges against those individuals and bringing in mineral resources and national mineral resources. So I will ask her to talk to that. I will also ask Coral to come back in terms of the feasibility of retaining a portion of the site from a technical biodiversity perspective. So hopefully that covers the plan of action for the future. This is certainly not a case of if the deproclamation goes ahead, government is no longer in there or responsible. Of course we are, Western Cape government as a whole, but those parties that have the mandate and functions would then have to actually take action. And that's essentially what our task team has been doing for the last 18 months, is making sure that all of the parties are in the discussions, and that in fact the move to deproclamation is understood by all of those parties, so that when the land, should the land be deproclaimed, it's handed back to the custodian, that those with the human settlements and land management functions actually are ready to deal with that, because it is something which will cause a pipeline of actions and of decisions that need to be taken. So with that, Natalie, perhaps you want to just come in quickly about the illegal sand mining operation, and then Coral on the concept of a portion of the site remaining as a provincial nature reserve. And then perhaps Dr. Omar would like to come in on any other issues that she would like to raise. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shipley, and thank you to Ms. Haywood. We didn't welcome you at the start of this meeting. You're most welcome, and please address the issue.
Thank you, honourable member. So yes, the sand mining issue is one that we have addressed with the Department of Mineral Resources. It is a mandate that sits firmly with. It is something that sits firmly within their mandate. So upon the observation of the activity, we made contact with the DMRE, with the relevant officers, reported the activity as well, and have been in collaboration with the DMRE and our colleagues at the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning to address the activity. So some of the actions that have been taken is issuing of pre-compliance notices to the operating companies of the machinery that has been observed on site. And we have also undertaken a blitz operation together with the DMRE and the law enforcement officials, as well as the South African Police Services. Unfortunately, the day that we were on site, there was no one to be found or seen other than a digger loader. And the DMRE did follow that up with the owner of that particular piece of machinery in order to understand who is behind the activity and who's renting the equipment and such. So to date, the DMRE have made the case for the South African Police Services in terms of that particular lead in terms of who the potential renter of the equipment is, and we are awaiting the outcome of that. So I think in summary, the bottom line is that we do continue to work with the DMRE in order to resolve this situation of the illegal sand mining. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's Ms. Burrs. I'm going to respond in terms of the feasibility of the remainder of the site. So when I went through the presentation and I indicated that there's roughly 305 hectares of the site which is still intact, the majority of that is it is the extent of the dam and some remnants basically to the north of the dam, which from a provincial nature reserve perspective, considering that it has lost the critical biodiversity features for which it was proclaimed, does not warrant it as a provincial nature reserve. However, in terms of catchment function, should be protected in the context of the catchment for the dam area. So the majority of the 300 hectares is within the 1 in 50,000 year floodline, indicating that, you know, it is basically, it is water area, and therefore, you know, on the scale of being a provincial nature reserve is not considered feasible. Thank you.
What?
Thank you. I see HOD Gerber's hand is up. Maybe you want to come in, Gerber?
Just briefly, if I might, Chairperson, I just wanted to add that Minister Cressy, National Minister, have already supported the deproclamation based on the facts on the ground, the fact that the biodiversity, that the original reason why the reserve was proclaimed no longer exists. So in writing, Minister Cressy have supported the deproclamation. But of course, there are also many other comments submitted, but just to share that with the committee. Thank you.
Good, thank you very much. I posed a question regarding the public participation process and the effect that that may have on our considerations this afternoon. Is there anybody that would like to come in? If none from the department or from Cape Nature, then I would like to ask Advocate Marsdorp to please assist. Mr. Gerber, your hand is raised again.
Yes, maybe to respond to that, and maybe Cape Nature also wants to come in, and then the advocate, of course, must advise. Yes, the matter has been referred to the Parliament as per the letter to the Speaker by Minister, but it's in process. So of course, whatever is required in terms of the two different processes, in order to come to an informed decision, needs to be in front of the decision makers. And therefore, yes, we were called to this meeting today, and therefore we're sharing all the information that we have. But the Standing Committee and Parliament must obviously decide what Parliament requires. Thank you.
Thank you. Advocate Marsdorp, would you like to come in here?
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, of relevance to me at this stage is whether this request, if you like, from the department is properly before the committee, because it is only competent for an MEC to do to initiate a process for the proclamation. I've seen the correspondence from the MEC's office to the office of the Speaker, and having apprise myself of the provisions of the Act, in particular 24(1)(b), as was quoted earlier by the colleagues, this matter is properly before the committee, and the MEC is properly authorized to bring this request or this application. The reasons that initially informed the proclamation, as Mr. Gabris mentioned, do not exist in large part anymore. Hence, for all intents and factual purposes, the reserve does not serve its purpose. Its material profile has been impacted in whichever way, for whatever reason. It is for the committee now to consider the merits of this request. And certainly the considerations emanating from a public participation process are equal in that equation of what the committee may consider. So other than that, Chairperson, I have nothing to add except that the matter is properly before the committee, and it is for the committee to recommend based on its considerations here now, including, of course, the public participation submissions, on whether it will support this request, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, Advocate Marstorp. I recognize Honourable Maran.
Speaker, Chairperson, thanks. Just on the last issue that speaks to the PPP, the public participation process. And I've heard the responses, also the response from the advocate, saying that if this committee basically makes a recommendation, that it's equal basically to a public participation process. I would like to understand, Chairperson, that in terms of law, the process that needs to be followed, whether we should have a public participation process and the outcome thereof, whether that should influence basically whether we support or not. All that I've heard earlier on is that there is 20 submissions, and 19 of those submissions were objections. Should we then base our recommendation on those objections that we have received? Or are we saying that let's allow the public participation to follow its course, and then after that, because my understanding, Chair, when you have spoken earlier, my understanding was, even if you have said that you were not aware of this process, but it seems it's not finalized yet, Chair. So I just want to like to understand in terms of law, whether we should allow a public participation process for this particular committee to consider. I don't want to arrive at a where one says that it seems that basically this particular issue is premature in front of us. I don't want to arrive at that. If the PPP basically is not a need, and for this committee basically to make a recommendation which is equally to that, then I will understand the responses basically from the officers and the advocate. Chair, that's one, Chair. Then also I fully understand the response by Mr. Gerber, because when I asked the question whether there is a process of eviction, and the response was not at the stage. So I understand basically the two key recommendations or what's it been called? Let me quickly, key considerations. The one is, Chair, and basically that's where for the issue of evictions falls under that category. If the deproclamation is not successful, then the issue of eviction will then come into place. But if it's successful, then we have to give consideration for integrating houses and so on and so forth. But everything is aftermath. It comes afterwards. Whether the deproclamation has been successful or not, it comes afterwards. I want to check, Chair, the discussions, and I don't see any report from the City of Cape Town basically on this particular matter. I don't see a report from Public Works on this particular matter, because what we've heard, there is ongoing discussions with those two. And even if those discussions is not completed, Chair, I would like to have an understanding of what they are saying and whether they are willing. And in terms of law, basically, they don't have a choice to take over the responsibility of those structures that's been erected in that particular area. Thanks.
Thank you. I recognize the hand of Honourable Bosman, and then Ms. Shippey.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and once again, good afternoon. Chair, I just want to caution us against running parallel processes, and as much as I think that the committee should have all the information at its disposal, I do think that we also need to rely on the opinion of experts. We do know that public participation is not an exact science, and sometimes we have to take into account people's emotional responses to the questions that are being asked. But in terms of the scientific evidence that we have been provided with, and in terms of the assessments that we've seen, the circumstances are that the land no longer meets the requirements of being a nature reserve as set out in Section 23. So I think that should be the basis on what we make a decision on. So I do want to caution us against running another public participation process. I don't think that is necessary. I think there is a process that's ongoing. And if we do need to get and we'll have sight of those responses, I'm sure that can be arranged. But I do think that there is already widespread evidence or agreement from the experts that the land no longer meets the requirements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I recognize Honourable Marais now, and then Ms. Shippey, you can come in afterwards.
Thank you, Chair. I want to start off by the remark by Honourable Member Bosman. He says public opinion is not an exact science. Neither are politicians or politics an exact science. Public opinion is the hallmark of democracy, that they should be consulted. Now, we heard that 305 hectares of this land is still intact. The dam and north of the dam. Do you mean it's possible to rehabilitate it and it can again form part of a biodiverse project? Or what is the land to be used for? If the people are told or are allowed to remain there, you're rewarding them. Why should it stop anybody else from invading other biodiversity areas? Why should it stop them? They know we got a lame duck government who won't act against them, and neither will Cape Nature do something. They pass the buck of housing to the city of Cape Town. So answer me, was the city of Cape Town part of your application to the courts? Because if housing is involved, they should have been there to tell the court whether they have the sufficient funds to provide alternative adequate housing or not. So, if COVID is to be used as an excuse, and we really don't know how long it's still going to be allowed to be used as an excuse, what in terms of risk management does Cape Nature intend doing to prevent this from happening? Now, the other thing that I'm concerned about, they said that the national minister supported the proclamation. I just want to know if I heard it correctly. The national government and the Western Cape government don't exactly read from the same page. So it doesn't matter what the national minister says. He won't give the answer. The answer must come from the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. So I want to ask the top department, and I want to ask the Cape Nature, what do you intend doing with the land now occupied by informal settlements? What in the end, what is the end game here? If they are finally to be evicted, what's the end game?
Thank you, Honourable Marais. And over to you to respond to those questions, Ms. Shippey.
Thank you very much. I think just to reference the presentation that was given earlier, you will see on the slides that deal with the legal process This has been advertised in the Government Gazette. It has also been advertised in newspapers in multiple languages, and there has been more than 60 days for comment. So it was noted in the Minister's original letter to the Speaker of the House that there were these two processes that needed to be followed. So the public participation process is according to the ordinance, but it serves the purpose of having collected the comments, the broad comments from the public in an open fashion, in a transparent fashion that is according to the requirements for good public participation by government. If I may suggest that from this meeting, a request is given to the Minister for him to make that comment available to yourselves so that you can then go through the detail of the comments that have been submitted, so it can be part of your consideration as well. Just in terms of the City of Cape Town being involved in the 305 hectares, so yes, the City of Cape Town has been involved in the discussions since 2020. There is an ongoing discussion, and unfortunately, these are our citizens. So whether or not any one organization does or doesn't have the budget for it, it is something that needs to be dealt with by government as a whole. And that is one of the reasons why there's also discussions with the National Department in terms of emergency housing grant funds for services, so that between the municipality, province and national, we will actually be able to engage with the constitutional obligations of those citizens and of the housing requirements that are made of government. The question and the focus really for this discussion, however, is what is Cape Nature's role in that? Cape Nature's fundamental purpose has nothing to do with basic services or human settlements. It is not positioned to deal with that. So it's really been the process of our discussions to date to try and understand who needs to be involved in that, who needs to apply for funding, should that be required, and none of those answers are Cape Nature. So the question before this committee that needs to be considered is, can deproclamation be supported or not? We understand that deproclamation opens up a full range of other discussions and decisions, but those decisions are not the ambit of this particular question and this particular legal enablement that is on the table at the moment. So the answer is yes, all parties have been involved in discussions. No one has existing ready lying money around to automatically respond to this, but we all have mechanisms at different levels of government to engage with what is our mandates and functions. So those processes will have to be undertaken in time and in a correct governance and legal sequence. And the first of the discussions is obviously this deproclamation discussion. As Coral mentioned earlier, the land, the 305 hectares, is essentially the surface area of the dam basin itself. So this is not like a normal dam where there's a big hole in the ground and it's very easy for you to mark where the edge of it is. It is bounded on one side by the river channel itself, and then at the southern point of the dam is essentially a sand berm. So from an engineering perspective, it has been closed off in order to capture the water and flood as a specific purpose to make sure that those flood waters then slow down before they hit Mfuleni, as well as the rest of the catchment below that. So most of that land is completely and utterly, its function is to flood and to take flood waters. And because it floods on a regular basis, it therefore, almost by default, will continue being a green area. So I think all of the parties at the moment are looking to try and make sure that the actual riverine corridor can function as it's supposed to, that the municipal infrastructure that is stopping floods from happening in Mfuleni and downstream can function and do what it needs to do without people being in danger. So the idea is to actually retain that as a functional riverine system and to protect it from further invasion. So that does mean that whoever is responsible for this land moving forward, irrespective of who that is, they will need to keep that riverine area clean and clear. And that includes removing people when they move on. So there is a relocation process that will move those people out of the riverine area. And the discussions now very much are around what processes need to be undertaken and by whom to keep it clear of future unlawful occupants. So they very much are a series of other mandates and functions that also need to play themselves out here. But the fundamental question is, should this site be deproclaimed or not? And as was explained by Coral, the sense from Cape Nature is that it can function as a good quality riverine infrastructure and a dam as a flood retention infrastructure, but that it is not of a biodiversity quality that Cape Nature would want to retain that area as a provincial nature reserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shippey. Honourable members, the question in front of us is then whether we as a committee support the withdrawal of the declaration of Driftstands Nature Reserve as a provincial nature reserve in terms of Section 24(1)(b) of the National Environmental Management Act for protected areas. So, honourable members, in the absence of any further hands, I want to put that question to you. Do we support the recommendation by the department? And I see 3 hands. Honourable Marais, if we could be brief, just express now whether you support or oppose. Thank you.
Before I support, or I can't vote on this committee. I'm not a member of the committee, so I merely want to ask, because I'm a member of the Agricultural Committee, if they say that it will revert back as what? I don't know what can we do with it. If we pass this and deproclaim it, and the people are not allowed to be in the riverline area, and the rest of the area, what's going to happen to it, and under whose protection will this area be if we pass this deep proclamation of the area? Then under whose auspices will it fall? Who will take responsibility for that area?
Thank you, Honourable Marais. Let's then just hear from Honourable Maran, Bosman, and then America.
Thanks, Chair. I am a member of this committee, Chair. But at this stage, Chair, it's difficult to express a view. And one of the reasons, and some of the reasons, Chair, is that we heard now that the Minister supports, but nothing is put in front of us that the Minister supports. I haven't seen a letter. If there's a letter, my apologies. We have heard that the City of Cape Town is involved, same with Public Works, but there is no report basically that tells us that how will they go about it, making sure that those people who are staying there will be safe. Is the City of Cape Town is saying, yes, we will take responsibility, we will relocate, but it will take us another 10 years. And tomorrow those people will be flooded. I don't have that information in front of me, Chair. And therefore, Chair, it's difficult for me to express a view whether we will support or not. Look, what we also know at this particular issue, it will only recommendations be to the House, and the House will express a view at a later stage. Maybe I should say, Chair, when that particular issue will appear in front of the House, at that stage I might have a view whether to support or not. Thanks.
Thank you. Honourable Bosman.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chair, I hear the comments from both Honourable Maran and Honourable Marais, and I do understand and have personal knowledge of the difficulties because this is my constituency. This falls in my constituency and these are my constituents. But I do think the question before us is whether this committee supports the proclamation of the Driftstands Nature Reserve and concurs with the opinion of the Minister that this should happen. And I would like to propose that we make that recommendation to the House that the committee supports the deproclamation, because in order for anything else to happen, we do need to ensure that this happens, and also that Cape Nature's responsibility in terms of what it currently is relinquished as well. So notwithstanding all the other things that need to happen, for now, I think the committee needs to support the deproclamation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable America.
Thank you, Chair. In the light of the rational reasons sort of presented to us by the department, and further to that, that the biodiversity of the reserve has irreparably been sort of destroyed, I second the proposal by Honourable Bosman that we support the proclamation of the reserve. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honourable America. Can I just ask, is there anybody that would like to respond to the questions asked by the Honourable Marais? Mr. Gerber? I think you may still be muted, Mr. Gerber.
There we go, sorry. Has indicated there's a number of decisions still to be made, but at this stage it's city infrastructure on the nature reserve property. So there's existing responsibility in terms of managing that stormwater flooding infrastructure by the city of Cape Town. And therefore, even at the moment, without the deproclamation, the city have responsibility in terms of its infrastructure. The city is, of course, also the local disaster management authority in terms of a municipal disaster, and it's the land use authority, and it's the level 2 assigned housing authority. But that's not, as we said, those things are still in process, and therefore decisions must still be made. Just as Minister Creasy have now given comment, and yes, whatever must be shared, but just as Minister Creasy now have already applied her mind in terms of that it doesn't justify the conservation status anymore from the National Conservation Authority's point of view in terms of the National Protected Areas Act. The city must likewise apply their mind in terms of whether they can justify into the future protecting that land, or whether they want to re-engineer. If they re-engineer, they're displacing the flood water elsewhere, which might cause more problems, but that's for the city to decide in terms of their infrastructure. So it's a partial answer only. It's city infrastructure. It will remain city infrastructure, but that could be reconsidered moving forward. And these are difficult decisions to be made. Thank you.
Mr. Gerber, honourable members, from what we've heard, I think you can all understand it's impossible to install the level of services that would be required for the people currently staying on the piece of land while it's still proclaimed as a nature reserve. And therefore, I would like to also add my support to that expressed by the Honourable America and the Honourable Bosman. We will have an opportunity for resolutions later on, and perhaps the Honourable Maran, if I may propose, you might request at that stage that the response from Minister Creasy, if received in writing, also be made available to this committee in due course. Good. So, honourable members, it seems to me then as if we're in support of the deproclamation, and I'm calling on Ms. Niekerk to just prepare a report in this regard, which will take probably closer to a number of seconds than minutes. I also, while she's preparing that, want to welcome the Honourable August, who has been able to now overcome the load shedding, or I think load shedding ended in this area. And he has also joined us. Honourable August, I don't know if you would like come in at this point in time. Unfortunately, I think you may have missed much of the debate, quite a lively debate with a number of questions asked and thankfully responded to. Honourable August.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chairperson. Unfortunately, I did have load shedding. It only went on at 2 o'clock, and I then could manage just after 2, and I then could manage to log in. I have listened to the last part of the debate, Chairperson, and I've also applied my mind with the presentation that was mailed to us. Therefore, I also am in support of what Honourable Bosman has proposed. Thank you, Chair.
Good. Thank you very much for that. Honourable Maran, I see your hand.
Yes, Chair. I want to check with you in terms of the report, as per Rule 90, whether per Rule 90 in terms of a minority view to be captured in the report. But in this case, Chair, I don't have a view to support or not to support, and whether that can be regarded also as a minority view. And if that it be captured as per Rule 90 of the standing rules.
My interpretation, Honourable Maran, is that what would then be minuted is that you, as a representative of the ANC, chose to abstain during the voting for this report. Would that be indeed covering your request?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Good, thank you. So we ask of Ms. Niekerk just to add a sentence to the report that the ANC chose to abstain and therefore did not express an opinion on the recommendation to the House. Honourable members, I think we must all understand that this is still just a recommendation to the House, that this report will then serve before the House, and that this will probably only happen when the House sits again during the third term of this year. And therefore, this is still just a recommendation. It's not a final decision by the Provincial Parliament of the Western Cape. Good. Ms. Niekerk, if you're ready, would you be so kind just to beam the report onto our screens?
I'll do so in a second, Chairperson.
Thank you, honourable members. While Ms. Niekerk is typing, as the Honourable Marais has actually indicated, this is one committee, but between the Honourable August and Honourable Marais, they alternate. Honourable Marais concentrates on the work of the Department of Agriculture, while the Honourable August concentrates when it deals with items such as what we discussed today, when it deals with the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning, as well as Cape Nature. And that's why he repeatedly said that he hasn't got a vote in the committee, that he's not a full-time member when it comes to environmental affairs. A number of members from the Democratic Alliance, from the ANC, as well as from the Freedom Front Plus, contacted me throughout the course of this week and indicated, and I think we all share that concern about the reported closure or imminent closure of the Ashton canning factory. And I then invited the Honourable Marais to this meeting so that when we deal with resolutions, that the members that have approached me would be able to help us decide on a plan of action going forward, as well as the role of this committee as the oversight committee over the Department of Agriculture. So we will be dealing with that after we've considered this report. I also recognize the Senior Procedural Officer, Mr. Vermeulen, at this stage.
Chairperson, thank you very much. Apologies. I just want to ask a question / comment that I want to make. I saw Ms. Niekerk just beamed the the draft report on the screen for a few seconds, but I see it disappeared. But that's okay. I just want to make a comment. Thank you, Ms. Nika. Let's just wait for the narrative to appear. I just want to make a statement. I think that very last, and another committee will consider it now, Chairperson, but the very last paragraph is difficult maybe for Ms. Nika to capture because it's not really in accordance with Standing Rule 90 anymore. I think it's like you explained, Chairperson. If there is an abstention at this stage, then there is really no opinion being expressed. So there's no minority opinion or view being expressed. So usually, like you actually rightfully said, Chairperson, that would usually be captured in the minutes. If the committee wants, or you, Chairperson, still want this type of explanation in the report, there's nothing wrong with it, but I just think it's no longer in accordance with Standing Rule 90. It's just a statement as part of the report, really. Thank you, Chairperson.
I see Honourable America.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I fully agree with Mr. Vermeulen. I don't think that even this report should contain any reference to the abstention of Honourable Moran that will be captured in the minutes of this particular meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Honourable Moran.
Yes, Chair. Chair, just for your information, and you are the chairperson of this committee since the beginning of the new administration, the 6th Parliament. And we have done this in every meeting where there was no view expressed by the minority. And it was captured in the report, and you can go back and check it, that in terms of rule standing, Rule 90, it was like that. It's been captured like that all the time, and there was no problem with that. But as it may be, Chair, I am fine with being in the report that the ANC have abstained and have no view on this particular matter at this stage. Thanks.
Good, thank you, Honourable Moran. Yes, so Honourable Members, this will then, as I've indicated, be referred to the House. And as Honourable Moran has indicated, that the chances are there that in the House, the ANC will communicate their agreed position on this report. So, Mr. Nikak, it then seems to me as if the advice is at this stage to remove that paragraph. I think it would be good if we could get advice also for not only this committee, but also for others who might find themselves in the same situation. My impression is that the minority view could be to support, to not support, or then to say that we do not have a view, and we do not want to express that view. But that is something which I think under our resolutions we should be covering just to satisfy ourselves as to what are the options for parties that do not want to express either support or opposition to a decision. Good, Ms. Nikak. So without that paragraph, would you please beam the report onto our screens?
There we go, Chairperson.
Good, thank you very much. And I'm just going to read this into the record, honourable members. Report of the Standing Committee on Agriculture, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning on the withdrawal of the declaration of the Drift Sands Nature Reserve in terms of Section 24(1)(b) of the National Environmental Management Protected Areas Act of 2003, Act 57 of 2003, dated the 23rd of June 2022 as follows. The Standing Committee on Agriculture, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning, having considered the subject of the withdrawal of the declaration of the Drift Sands Nature Reserve in terms of Section 24(1)(b) of the National Environmental Management Protected Areas Act 2003, Act 57 of 2003, referred to it in accordance with Standing Rule 92, recommends that the House supports the withdrawal of the declaration of the Drift Sands Nature Reserve. Honourable members, you've already expressed your views, and this report was drafted then in line with that. Honourable America, do you believe we can support this report?
Chairperson, I do propose that we support the report.
Much appreciated.
Chair.
Any other views? Honourable Maran, did I hear your voice?
Yeah. Yes, Chair. Just on the issue of Rule 90, Chair. And nowhere in Rule 90 does it says a minority view should be whether you have voted against. Nowhere does that Rule 90 reflect that particular issue. And in terms of Rule 90, my minority view is not to express a view.
Thank you, Honourable Maran. My understanding.
Rule 90 is there, it is not, Chair.
Yes. Honourable Maran, my understanding was that we for now follow the advice of the Senior Procedural Officer to say, but please ensure that this view of yours is captured in the minutes. But when it comes to the report, that only the fact that everybody expressed support or alternately abstained, that only the support be captured for now. That is my understanding in terms of what Mr. Van Beelen has advised. And as I've said, I believe we should refer this for legal advice on perhaps also the rules of order as to whether the minuting of an abstention of vote should also have been included in here. Good. I see Honourable Bosman, then Van Beelen, and then Honourable Murray.
Thanks, Chairperson. Chair, I was just going to second the proposal by Honourable America. Much
appreciated. Mr. Van Beelen.
Chairperson, thank you very much. I'll be as brief as possible. Chairperson, this Rule 90 is being and has been discussed behind the scenes quite a bit by the administration and how to interpret it, because it can be quite technical at times. And we don't want to play policeman. We can't, as administration, to say this or that doesn't necessarily fall within the rule. But the first words, Chairperson, that we use is the word abstention. So when we speak about a vote, usually you have a yay or a nay, and then you have abstentions. So that's how a person voted. That's not necessarily a view. But if Honourable Maran or any other member says the last words, which is slightly different than the abstention that was first mentioned, to say in terms of their minority view, that is expressed now according to Rule 90, they expressed the view, I can't remember the exact words, you can correct it, but that they have deliberated on the subject and they will give a view later. That's a slightly different, Chairperson, than to say that they're abstaining from voting at this stage. So if he wants to change the word, or any member wants to change the word like that, Chairperson, I don't think any one of us can say, look, that's not a minority view. But an abstention clearly is the way you vote, that you're not voting on a matter. I don't want to be too technical, and I think that's it from my side. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Van Beelen. Honourable Murray.
Chair, I wanted to address you on something slightly away from what we are discussing now. It concerns a matter that's happening.
Can I ask, Honourable Murray, my apologies for interrupting. Can we just quickly finish this, and then I'll go straight to you? Is that fine with you?
Yes, sir.
Good. Thank you, honourable members. It seems then to me as if there's been overwhelming support for the report. Perhaps if I could ask Ms. Nikak just to beam it up again so that everybody can be happy that what we have seen is what we've supported, and that will be sent through to the House. Good. So report what is to be considered then in the House. Thank you very much, honourable members. That then deals with that point on the agenda. Honourable Maran.
Chair. I want my minority view to be captured in the report. The minutes is something else. I want my view to be captured within the report as per Rule 90 of the standing rules.
Yes, it's my understanding that you've got that right to insist that your view
But
be.
I haven't seen it in the report now.
No. Okay. So if you insist, so what you're saying is you're not accepting Mr. Vermeulen's explanation, and that you.
Mr. Vermeulen made it clear that they don't want to play police, so it's for us to decide whether how we have done it before, whether it's correct or not. We have done it before.
Thank you, honourable members. I'm looking to you for guidance and support, because you have now expressed your support for the deep proclamation, as well as for the report in its current format. We do know that minority views are, at the request of minority parties, also captured. Honourable Bosman, if you could help us to escape from this conundrum, I'll appreciate that. Thank you.
Chair, yes, it's a bit too late because the report has now been adopted, but I'd just like some clarity. So what is Honourable Maran's minority view? Is it that Honourable Maran is abstaining from supporting or not supporting? I'm not quite sure what the minority view is.
Yes, my understanding is that his view is that he hasn't got a view at this point in time.
Then, Chairperson, I think there's nothing wrong with the report as it is, and Honourable Maran can express his view in the House when we debate the report.
Standing Rule 90, Chairperson, made it clear that a minority view, the member can request that the minority view be captured in the committee report. As it stands now, it's not captured.
Yes, Honourable Maran, my understanding is a view can be captured. The lack of a view cannot be captured. And that is what I think Mr. Vermeulen has pointed out to us. If you take a view in the sense that you do not support, then that can be minuted. But if you say
Rule 90 doesn't speak about support or not support. It doesn't say that in Rule 90. That a view should be support or not to support. It says that if the minority have a view, then that view can be requested to be captured in the report.
Indeed, but my impression is that you do not have a view at this point in time. Is that correct?
My view is to not to express a view on the to support or not to support.
Okay, I understand the technicalities. Can I get back to Honourable Marais? Is this on this point, please?
No, if I can help my honourable colleague, a view is an opinion. Now, if you do not have an opinion, then you have not declared your view. So I know that your decision is that you are not going to either support or go against. So that's your decision, but that's not your view.
Okay, thank you very much.
Why is it different? Why is it different now? We have done it all the time.
Thank you.
Why is it different now?
Honourable Maran, thank you very much. I think the matter is.
You are not answering me. I'm asking, why is it different now? We have done it all the time.
Honourable Maran, can I ask that Mr. Vermeulen, as senior procedural officer, just assist us?
Chairperson, thank you very much. Chairperson, I think if Member Maran might agree that the wording that was used, and it's usually during the budget processes when the budget votes are considered, was something more according to the lines of the following. It's usually in accordance with Standing Rule 90. The African National Congress expressed its minority view that it will reserve its opinion on the matter for expression in the House. Now you see, Chairperson, it's slightly technical, but it doesn't say that there's no view. I know maybe we're playing here with technicalities, but I also don't think so. it's saying, look, we review. That's our view is at this stage that we are reserving our opinion for expression in the House. So they're not saying really whether there's an abstention or not. It's saying what I read, and I think that has gone through in the past because that's the way it needs to be insisted upon. So I don't know if that could help, Member Maran, if we can change the wording to that, if that would satisfy the committee at the same time. I don't know, Chairperson.
Very much, thanks.
Good, thank you. Honourable Bosman.
Chairperson, I think we've adopted the report. It's been proposed, it's been seconded, and we've concluded that the definition of a minority view is a dissenting opinion. Honourable Maran chosen not to.
Even before the report was adopted, I have expressed that it should be captured.
Honourable Maran, please do not while another member is speaking, just barge in. Sorry, Honourable Bosman, back to you.
I think, Chairperson, it is sufficient to note it in the minutes that Honourable Maran has not made up his mind on whether he supports or not. And I'm sure when we get to the House, Honourable Maran would have, by that time, have formed a considered opinion. But I think I'm going to have to agree with Honourable Murray here that a minority view is a dissenting opinion. Honourable Maran does not have an opinion either way at this time. So we can't include a minority view into the report that has already been adopted. So my proposal is, Chair, that we move forward with the business of the committee because that matter has been dealt with.
Thank you. There's been a proposal that we step off this matter now. So thank you very much.
I'm not satisfied with this. I'm saying before the report was adopted, I have expressed a view in terms of Rule 90, right? It's the Honourable Bosman's view. It's his view, but his view does not mean he is correct, that it is not a view. It's not correct. The same with the Honourable Murray. I'm saying we have done this all the time. We have done this all the time, and there was nothing wrong with it at that particular point. So we cannot come now, whilst I basically have expressed a view in terms of Rule 9 to say that the report has already been adopted by the time. It was not.
Thank you, Honourable Maran.
I am saying to you, Chair, that if the report read like this, it's not basically what I've said, or mine is absent in that committee report. It has not been captured, and I want it to be corrected. Whether it is like the Mr. Vermeulen have basically captured it, I don't have a problem with that.
Chair, with your permission, if Honourable Maran claimed precedent, that's what he's doing. It has been done like that before. You must at least give this committee the benefit of his proof that there's been a precedent where something similar happened in a committee which was accepted and minuted the way he says. But you can't claim precedent without proof to back it up.
Yes, thank you, honourable members. A motion of order was put by the Honourable Bosman that we step off this matter. It is my impression that there is support for that, and I sincerely trust that this matter will come up under our resolutions and that we will look towards the administration to find middle ground or a solution to this, because I also fully understand Honourable Maran's position in this regard, and he claimed that there have been in the past similar cases, and I think, except perhaps for a word or two, he has indeed in the past also exercised his right to abstain. So, Honourable Maran, unfortunately, we've now stepped off this, but be assured this is not the last word in this regard. Good. Honourable members, this now brings us under general and the resolutions that we have there. Can I ask that as the first resolution, we just ask Ms. Niekerk to note that we would like clarity in writing on whether when a representative of a party is not in a position to already express either support or not for a report, that whether that would also be able to be captured in that report, and that we receive feedback in writing from either the administration or, and hopefully, in concurrence with one another, the legal advisors to the Provincial Parliament. Would that be in order with you, honourable members?
Chairperson, I don't know if you can see my hand.
I see you.
Thank you. Now that we have concluded the business for which this meeting was convened for, can we allow the administration to leave the meeting before we deal with resolutions? Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much. Honourable members, as I've indicated, the remainder of the resolutions will probably be dealing with issues regarding the Ashton Canning Company. So thank you for reminding me of that, Honourable America. I want to say then thank you very much to the HOD, Mr. Gerber, the CEO, Dr. Omar, and their staff members for assisting us this afternoon in coming to a conclusion on the matter before us. I think we must also acknowledge that quite often, we're not in a position to make the kind of decisions that one would like to do, but that circumstances quite often determine the outcomes, and that eventually we need to take decisions that's in the best interests of this province and its people, and not only in the best instances of conservation per se. So thank you very much for helping us in dealing with really a very difficult matter for we that love the environment. So thank you very much for that, Mr. Gerber, and you're welcome to leave this meeting now. You are excused. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, honourable members.
Thank you, honourable members. Thank you, Mr. America, for reminding me that we are actually still taking up their time. As I've said, we've had a number of members that expressed, and I think we can all agree with that, our real disappointment with the job losses and the economic impact of the imminent closure of the Ashton Canning Company. And I do know that in terms of a media report this morning, some concerned people have already approached the Minister Windy, and who has apparently also passed this on to the Department of Economic Development and Tourism. And I'm just wondering whether I would be able to just ask the Honourable Bosman, as the chairperson of that committee, because, honourable members, for me, it's important that we all stay in our lanes. Agriculture often also impacts on things such as tourism, economic development, and so on. But obviously, our oversight is over the Department of Agriculture. On the other hand, we cannot ignore what's happening in the private sector, and perhaps there may be factors from the Department of Agriculture or even from national government that may have contributed to the closure or imminent closure of this factory. And I think it's important for us to deal with that, because the retention of jobs and the creation of jobs is a very important matter to us all in South Africa, with our record unemployment figures, etc. So, Honourable Bosman, would you like perhaps just to help us? Where do we, as the Standing Committee concentrating on agriculture, comes in, and where does it become a matter for the Department of Economic Opportunities or Economic Development?
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, at this stage, I don't think we have any role to play just yet. I have engaged the Minister of Finance and Economic Opportunities, and it seems the Western Cape government is engaged, and both the Minister of Agriculture and the Minister of Scofet is dealing with it. There is several meetings and engagements that are ongoing with all the stakeholders. So that includes Tiger Brands, as well as the consortium that is most likely, or the consortium that's currently busy trying to put together the funding to purchase the facility. So Tiger Brands has indicated that they are no longer able to run the facility, and a consortium of fruit farmers in the area and key stakeholders are trying to put together a deal to be able to purchase it. Tiger Brands, in terms of the sort of agreement that they have, has given them 60 days to do that. So the minister has indicated that meetings are taking place next week, and that Wesgro has also been brought in to assist to see how the Western Cape government can intervene. So high-level meetings that includes the Premier as well as the Minister are taking place. So I don't think we have a role at this moment, and I think we might just need to give the Western Cape government some space to be able to understand what is that they can do. And maybe in the next 2 weeks or so, once that have taken place, we can then look at how we, both as a sort of agriculture committee, looking at those sort of 10 soft fruit farms that supply the factory, and then also finance and economic opportunities, look at what sort of comes out of those engagements. But I think it would be premature if we engage now whilst these discussions are ongoing.
Thank you, Honourable Bosman. Honourable members, I do believe that we have got the opportunity to invite the Department of Agriculture to come and address us on what the impact on agriculture would be, what the circumstances in terms of agricultural production, and specifically the production of deciduous fruit, may have been, have there been a decrease in the tonnage or the volume of fruit that's been available. So if you wouldn't mind, can we from the agriculture side approach this issue, perhaps also invite the producers of deciduous fruit to come and address us on how the closure would affect their roles, and particularly I think when it comes to job creation or job losses, that those Western Cape or the producers of deciduous fruit come and address us on that issue, as well as perhaps external factors that may have led to the imminent closure of this factory. Would you support that we, as a body concentrating on agriculture, that we approach it from a producer point of view? Honourable America, you are recognised.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Chair, we must bear in mind that we entering a constituency period, and more and more committees are requesting to have meetings during the constituency period, and I don't think from our side that is the way we should go. We might as well then dispense with the constituency period. Nonetheless, I think what you're saying is very important. That discussion needs to be had, but I support Honourable Bosman is that we need to give the process a chance that is currently taking place, and not trying to preempt the outcome of the discussions that is taking place. Therefore, from our side, I don't think I'm very much in favour with us meeting with the Department of Agriculture and producers, whatever, at this stage, until we have given the current process that is going on a fair chance to come up with proposals. Thereafter, we can do whatever we need to do, but I think at least we should give this process a chance. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Honourable American. I'm in full support that we try to observe the constituency period, and I've got no intention of calling us as a committee to meet during the recess period. This meeting, as you know, was already called at relatively short notice, because I wouldn't like us as a committee to be blamed for the delays in coming to report to the House. But yes, I do believe that the things will play out, and we are no line managers. We only have an oversight function and a legislative function. But I think it seems to me that there is support for us taking a broader view of the factors that lead to job losses in the agricultural and also the secondary, agro-processing environment. Honourable Marais, I recognise you.
Thank you so much, Chair. I think we will really be cutting off our nose here to spite our face. I can't see how a constituency week should take precedence over the effect closing down of Tiger Brands in Langeberg will have on 4,500 agri workers that will lose their jobs and farmers losing millions because their fruit rots in stores because they can't can it. And Tiger Brand's decision to not sell the infrastructure and equipment for canning to would-be buyers, but only the business itself. I don't know if members of this committee have acquainted themselves of the extent of the disaster that's awaiting us. And to think Constituency Week, where you go around meeting your constituents, is more important than this. It's ridiculous. Here people are waiting on the Western Cape government to give them hope. I spoke to the mayor and deputy mayors of the Langeberg. They've already been in discussions on this issue. They haven't received satisfaction. The Tiger Brands is going to shut down their whole operation. And I don't know if members realize how big that is. They're going to close all their factories, which is a 70-year-old establishment. And they're going to move their equipment to do canning to Gauteng. And we are worried about constituency. This is our biggest constituency in terms of tourism and income. We're going to lose 300 million rand a month just in wages that would have been paid to the workers. We've got to get in now and show we will take the bull by the horns, and we are prepared under the leadership of our chairperson to engage with the relevant ministers and other portfolio committees to give the people out there hope that something is being done. This is no time to have a nice ride about in your constituency.
Thank you, Honourable Murray. Honourable Murray, I think we must just be careful. If we say we give people hope, I don't think the Western Cape would like to go the route of the South African Airways with bailouts, etc. And I would also like to propose a resolution that we do express our concerns about this. But as you've indicated, there are a lot of talks already ongoing in this regard. And I would just like us to stay in our lane and not to start thinking of, salvaging bankrupt enterprises or non-profit making enterprises. I think we've seen where that has led our country to. And there are numerous examples of state intervention, which eventually, unfortunately, made South Africans even poorer. So please, I think if you could just come up with a resolution where you believe, we could really contribute without interfering in the private affairs of private companies. Honourable Bosman and then Honourable America.
Chair, I think nobody's saying that constituency period is more important than looking at saving these 250 permanent jobs and the 4,300 seasonal job opportunities that are created. I think we need to allow the request to the Western Cape government to take its course. The Western Cape government is in the process of working with Westgrow and engaging with all the stakeholders to ensure that they are able to help find and raise the necessary funds, and Westgrow is assisting with the facilitation of those agreements. So I do think as a committee we need to look at it, and I think it's something that we can do in a few weeks' time. Our constituency period is not very long, so by the time we get back and we have our next meeting, we can then have a briefing, and we can perhaps ask the Department of Agriculture to give us a broader briefing on the soft fruit industry and also the different impacts of whether it is A, the closure of factories, or B, the impact of climate change on the sector. But I want us to allow for space so that these discussions take place. And if needs be, if anything else changes in the next 2 weeks, we are all in constant communication. We can then schedule that meeting. But saying that we do not care, I think, is a massive mischaracterization of what's being said in this committee. Thanks, Chair.
Honourable Bosman, honourable members, Honourable Bosman has proposed a resolution. Can I ask Honourable America that we now just for the time being stay with that proposed resolution so that I can just get an indication from members whether that their support for that resolution?
Chair, I'd like to make an amendment to the resolution in the sense that we have a joint standing committee meeting, that being SAFOC and as well as SAFTOC, whatever, as well as this committee, when we have that engagement with both the Department of Finance and Economic Opportunities, as well as the Minister of Agriculture. But Chair, that is my amendment, but I would like to take umbrance to the fact that Honourable Marais intimated that I consider constituency period more above issues that are important to our people, and his rhetorical populism is not taken very seriously by myself and not taken very kindly at all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable America. Please, honourable members, I wouldn't like us to start addressing one another or express us on another member's conduct. But yes, so there is now, honourable members, in front of us a number of resolutions. The first one is that we express our concern about the potential job losses. The second one, and if it's fine with you, Honourable Bosman, is a request that when we meet regarding this specific facility and the potential initiatives to address the danger of this facility closing down, that this be a joint meeting between agriculture, and therefore that we as this committee write to the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Financial and Economic Opportunities, which happens to be in this meeting as well, requesting for such a joint meeting at a suitable time. And then thirdly, that we as a committee on agriculture invite the Department of Agriculture to also come and address us, just can I call it, on the agricultural aspects and the impact on agriculture and how the Department of Agriculture see its role in assisting our producers and particularly our farm workers, etc., in terms of their mandate to support the growth of jobs and the growth of agriculture in the Western Cape. Those are, I think, about 3 resolutions that we've now that I have on the table. And if I can just get an indication, is there anybody that does not support those resolutions? Honourable Marais, I'll recognize you just now, but can I just, are there any other members that would say they're not in support of those proposed resolutions? None, so I take it as concurrence. Honourable Marais. Honourable Marais, you're muted. I wonder if the Honourable...
Okay.
There you are. We hear you now.
Thank you, Chair, for your very, shall I say, adult response to whatever Mr. America said in defense of my right to say what I said and not to be insulted. Thank you. I just want to say that this is so important. I've received so many calls the past day about this. People, I'm not saying when are we coming to visit them in our constituency. They say, what are you doing? So I want to thank you, and I thank the committee. We've got to move forward. I know that we might say we are perhaps not able to do whatever we should do, but at least get in the ring and be seen to be fighting. Doesn't mean when you enter a ring, you're going to win the fight, but at least people will appreciate your efforts. So I think that your suggestion, Mr. Chair, should be welcomed by everybody and say that, yes, this is an example of how we are supposed to act in a case where the people face crises, especially when farmers have explained they can export the goods to Ukraine and other countries. There's no tons. Tiger brands have not even ordered the tins from companies who produce this, like Metal Box. So what must they do with their fruit? What must they do with their vegetables that is waiting to be canned? It's already been picked. How can we ever consider Constituency Week more important? So I just want to thank this committee and thank the chairman especially. Thank you. I'm leaving this meeting now.
Thank you, honourable members. That then deals with those resolutions. We've only got one item left, and that is the consideration of the minutes of the meeting of the 7th of June. And I would really appreciate it if we could consider and adopt that before we break for the recess period. There you see the honourable members present on the 7th of June. You see the apologies. Can we have page 2? Thank you, honourable members. The minutes have been tabled. Are there any members that would like to support or not support? Honourable Bosman.
Chair, I propose that we adopt the minutes.
Thank you very much. I believe that the Honourable America was not a member of this committee at that time, and the Honourable August was submitted his apologies. It seems to me the Honourable Marais has just left, so it's up to me then just to also confirm that I support the adoption, and therefore this set of minutes has been duly adopted. Honourable members, from my side, I believe that is now all that we had to deal with this afternoon in terms of our agenda. Ms. Nikak, are there any other aspects that you need to bring under our attention before the meeting is adjourned?
Chairperson, just to let the committee know that the sectional titles amendment bill, the closing date for comment is the 4th of July. It was published in newspapers and on social media from the 10th of June onwards. To date, there's been no comments that have been received, no written comments received as yet. So I just wanted the committee to be aware of that. And then also that the next committee meeting after constituency period would be on the 26th of July. Thank you.
Honourable Bosman.
Chair, can I perhaps ask that Ms. Van Niekerk, if it's not been done yet, also send the request for comment for the public participation on the sectional title bill to the industry stakeholders directly as well, perhaps to the South African Property Management Association, as well as the, I don't know what it's called now, but I think it used to be called the Estate Agency Board as well, because it might be that those stakeholders don't read the same newspapers that we've already advertised in.
Ms. Nikak.
Chairperson, I'd just like to confirm that stakeholder letters have been sent out to specific stakeholders, property management consultants, banks, body corporates. We have quite an extensive list of stakeholders that letters were sent out to as well. And this is in addition to the newspaper publications.
Good, thank you, Ms. Nikak. Perhaps you would be able to provide us with that list of stakeholders?
I can certainly do that, Chairperson.
Good, thank you, Honourable Bosman. And if you are missing any names on that list, please liaise with Ms. Nikak. I do know that she's just as anxious as us to get as wide a participation as possible. Honourable members, with that then, and the expectations that we will see each other again on the 26th, I want to wish you a very productive constituency period. I know it normally entails a lot of traveling. My request is that you, as far as it depends on yourselves, keep safety in mind, and that we will all return in good spirit and good health when we see each other on the 26th. And again, a particular word of thanks to Advocate Marsdorp, but particularly to Ms. Niekerk. Ms. Niekerk, I hope you will get home safely from Gauteng. And again, thank you very much for taking the lead in this meeting, despite being called to attend the training course during the course of this week as well. So, honourable members, thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Nomfundo.
Pleasure, Shireen.
Okay, has the recording stopped and everything now?
Yes, I stopped. Yes.
Live stream ended also?
Candice should stop the live.
Candice?
Candice?
Yes, I'm here.
Has the live stream ended?
You know what? Yes, it is.
Okay.